Hi, I'm Chris Coyle, and today I'll be talking about the various publishing and release strategies implemented by various video game companies and the difference between software and hardware companies and how they're working together to create these giant video games. The strategies used by these companies have created games known as either first, second, or third-party games. In a minute, we will go into what all this means and examples of these types of games in our daily lives. Before getting into why there's so many different games, it's important to know the difference between hardware and software. Hardware refers to the device or console in which the games are being played on, while the software is the game itself that is needed for the hardware. The two coexist and are worthless without each other. Here are some of the top hardware companies in the video game industry. Many of them have their own publishing companies, which allows them to make games for their own consoles and hardware. This is referred to as first-party game publishing. Here are a few hardware examples from the top hardware companies. On the left is the Xbox from Microsoft, in the middle is the PlayStation from Sony, and on the right is the Switch from Nintendo. All of these are examples of hardware that require software games to be played. Here are a few examples of the actual softwares that can be played on various hardware systems. It is important to note that these softwares are not directly from hardware companies, making them third-party games. This gives the games access to be played on mostly all hardwares without restriction. Here we will be taking a look at the different games released by Nintendo for their DS. Out of all the games featured in their initial release, only a third were first-party games. This shows the vast market and need for second and third-party game publishers. The trend of lack of first-party games shows further in this picture, which shows the third-party publishers for the Nintendo Switch games. This list is less than half of the actual amount of third publishers used for the Switch games. This shows that hardware companies are more than willing to produce games not only created by themselves. This picture represents the best-selling games for the original PlayStation made by Sony in 1994. Sony was one of the top 3 publishers and developers for their games, although none of the top 5 most popular games were products of Sony. The original PlayStation showed the power and revenue that games can bring in even for third-party publishers. This caused Sony to focus a bit more on their own publishing division, which allowed them to produce the 5 best-selling games of the PlayStation 4's release.